Pete Hegseth has threatened U.S. Senator Mark Kelly with an investigation for participating in a video that reminded members of the military that they do not have to follow illegal orders. Today on All Rise News, I'll be interviewing a Yale Law School legal scholar, Eugene Fidell, about the Uniform Code of Military Justice, about Pete Hegseth's threats and more. Take a moment to subscribe to Legal AF to see videos like these, like the interview that I have coming up. Before we begin, I'm going to read the social media post posted on the Department of Defense's website. I'm going to quote from their post where they call themselves by the unofficial name, the Department of War. Quote, "The Department of War has received serious allegations of misconduct against Captain Mark Kelly, USN retired. In accordance with the Uniform Code of Military Justice, 10 U.S.C. 688, and other applicable regulations, a thorough review of these allegations has been initiated to determine further actions which may include recall to active duty for court-martial proceedings or administrative measures." The statement goes on to say that federal laws such as 18 U.S.C. 22387 may be implicated, and goes on to conclude, quote, "All service members are reminded that they have a legal obligation under the UCMJ to obey lawful orders and that orders are presumed to be lawful." A service member's personal philosophy does not justify or excuse the disobedience of an otherwise lawful order, end quote. And here to break down this issue for us today is Eugene Fidell, a Yale Law School scholar and an expert on military justice. Thank you, Eugene, for joining us. It's my pleasure. So, what was your first reaction when you heard Pete Hegseth's comment and the announcement of an investigation against Senator Kelly? My first reaction was that he was not fit to hold the office that he's holding. I thought his comments were preposterous. The course of action that he's undertaken, presumably with a view to chilling spokespeakers on the other side of the aisle, is impossible to accept in a democratic society. I mean, members of Congress are sent there. The senators are sent there to represent their constituents. They're sent there to be part of a deliberative body. They're sent there to communicate with their constituents and with the public at large, as well as with the federal workforce, which includes the armed forces. So the idea of trying to gag them or chill their free speech really is so un-American. And just a basic point to hammer home the comment that set this whole thing into motion, that a member of the military has a right and an obligation to refuse illegal orders. That's an accurate statement of the law. Correct. Totally accurate. Totally accurate. As a matter of fact, it says so right in the UCMJ, doesn't it? That's correct. So I'm going to play a clip right now from Mark Kelly that Senator Kelly had responded to this. "Rachel, I've had a missile blow up next to my airplane. I've been shot down, nearly shot down multiple times. I've flown a rocket ship into space 4 times, built by the lowest bidder. And my wife, Gabby G. Ford's meeting with her constituents, shot in the head, 6 people killed around her. A horrific thing. She spent 6 months in the hospital. We know what political violence is, and we know what causes it too. You know, the statements that Donald Trump made is insightful, incites others. He's got millions of supporters. People listen to what he says more so than anybody else in the country. And he should be careful with his words, but I'm not going to be silenced here. Is it stressful? I've been stressed by, things more important than Donald Trump trying to intimidate me into shutting my mouth and not doing my job. He didn't like what I said. I'm going to show up for work every day, support the Constitution, do my job, hold this administration accountable, hold this president accountable when he is out of line. That's the responsibility of every U.S. senator and every member of Congress. He's not going to silence us. He was speaking to Rachel Maddow, and he called Donald Trump's comments insightful, noting that when Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth in the past have gone after people, it's resulted in harassment. Have you seen this pattern going on as well? Sure, we've all seen it. Members of Congress have gotten hate mail, and they've been swatted, and they've had pizza boxes delivered to their homes. I wonder if it's pepperoni or just mushroom pizza, but that's another matter. There is an opportunity, unfortunately, given the degradation of political discourse in our country and the increase in political violence to see this kind of thing. And when the president of the United States or one of his subordinates uses, let's say, excited utterances, calculated to get people worked up, this is the predictable outcome. So I think it's really reprehensible what they've done. And it's like tossing a match into a gas tank to see if there's any gas there. This is what brought us January 6th, to be honest. And you'd mentioned the pizza doxing. It was recently reported that Marjorie Taylor Greene was the recipient of a pizza delivery to her doorstep. For viewers who aren't familiar with this trend, pizza doxing is a phenomenon where, and it's typically been judges who have been the victim of this, where a person sends a pizza delivery to the judge's home. Sometimes in the name of the murdered family member of a different judge, that it operates both as a death threat and as a message that I know where you live. It didn't escape my attention, Professor, that the fact that this threat from Pete Hegseth came out on the day of the dismissal of the cases against James Comey and Letitia James, and the whole background of this, that Pete Hegseth has been purging the Judge Advocate General Corp. Can you talk about that? And now that this probe has been announced, what would happen in a properly functioning JAG Corps if this matter was referred to them? It would be killed in the cradle. If the administration had not been sending signals that were so dismissive of the rule of law in the armed forces. If they hadn't fired the Judge Advocates General, if they hadn't been, let's say, more forthcoming about, for example, the legal basis for the boat strikes in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific, there's a whole host of things. If they hadn't decided, well, the Judge Advocates General are not going to be 3-star officers anymore. They're going to be 2-star officers all. That's one thing after another. If Secretary Hegg had not gone to Quantico for that photo opportunity, with all the admirals and generals that you may recall, and said that the legal system should not be his comments were that the legal system was like a speed bump, and we had to get rid of speed bumps. We had to, focus on lethality than these inconvenient things like the rule of law. All of this is a package, and there's a sense in which the abusive treatment of Senator Kelly and the comments that the president and Mr. Hegseth have made about the group of six, the gang of six, it just bespeaks a dismissive attitude to the rule of law, to the role of separation of powers in a democratic society under our Constitution. You're talking about members of a co-equal branch of the government. In fact, it's Congress that's provided for in Article 1. You don't get to the president until you're in Article 2. So this whole thing has become so terribly hosed up. How we're ever going to get Humpty put back together again in terms of American democracy is really should be a high order of business for everybody who cares about this country. You had mentioned the group of six. Mr. Pexted called them in his moniker the Sedition Six. Can ridiculous. Absolutely. And can just to hammer home that point, can accurately stating the law be sedition? Not where I come from. Yeah, this is like an absurd Top Sitter v. 1984 misuse of language. I mean, it's like calling the Department of Defense the Department of War. It's, the abuse of language and getting entirely untethered to reality or to the legal realities. That's what we're seeing here. And I have to say, despite the loss of so many mainstream media outlets, newspapers are, largely having a hard time. But it is a fact that the media generally has been on this issue from the beginning and has been aggressive and appropriately aggressive. And what it's doing, including what you're doing with this interview, is trying to re-enter the conversation back to the basics of our democratic society and touchwood for the media. Where would we really? I know you have a horse in the race, but where would we be without the media in this environment? We'd have people in high positions basically getting away with a murder in a political sense. I mean, it's murder of the language. It's murder of logic. It's murder of truth. Let's start with murder of the language and move on to a kind of more precise sub-subject of that word. But on to your point, how it's actually the Department of Defense. There has not been a change from approved of the name of that agency from Congress. So to this day, there is no such thing, to your point, as a Department of War. I want to turn to the other definition of murder, I think you've been sharply critical publicly about what to call the strikes in the Caribbean. Describe, because I think that gets to the core of what this video is about, that you have the right to refuse illegal law orders. What is your view of the legality of those strikes? The strikes are clearly illegal. We're not in an armed conflict, and therefore and we're not threatened with an armed conflict. Indeed, we are the people who have threatened armed conflict by amassing a large armada off the coast of Venezuela at tremendous expense to the taxpayers. God knows what it costs to run an aircraft carrier for an hour. I can't even imagine what the tab is for the taxpayers. So where if anyone is the aggressor, we're the aggressor, but it's really not an armed conflict. There's no armed force on the other side. These people running these boats, which presumably in some cases are carrying drugs, are not invading us. And to sort of pretend that this is an armed conflict, or to call it an armed conflict, doesn't make it an armed conflict. And everybody I know, including the country's great experts on the law of armed conflict, are in agreement on this. Now, unfortunately, the administration has failed to reveal to us, mere citizens, the actual legal analysis on which they rely for justifying the boat strike operation. This is an opinion of the Office of Legal Counsel. Some people on the Hill have seen it. I believe it's classified. But the idea that we're engaging in a course of conduct where there's no opposing armed force and we're killing people by the scores, and not getting anybody we can prosecute, not getting any hard evidence because that's all in Davy Jones' locker at this point, is like ridiculous. Now, I was a lawyer in the U.S. Coast Guard. My last assignment was in the Maritime Laws and Treaties Branch in headquarters. And one of the things we did was interdiction, mostly having to do with fisheries regulation, but also drugs. And the Coast Guard is all over this. The Coast Guard has an effective program for identifying and stopping and apprehending and seizing drug runners. It's done without shooting people to death. It's done without the use of missiles. It's done in a way where we get live witnesses who can testify. For example, who's in charge of the operation? In other words, do what prosecutors and law enforcement people do, which is try to work their way up the chain of organized crime and obtain evidence that can be used in a trial in federal district court. That's what you do if you're trying to suppress the drug trade, and to go immediately to the use of high-tech weapons that turn boats into splinters, that send the evidence to the bottom of the sea, and that turn human beings into hamburger with no questions asked. This is not wanted dead or alive. This is wanted dead is the exact antithesis of modern maritime law enforcement. And it's offensive, and it's a disgrace. Some legal experts have described it as murder. Do you agree? Yes. If members of the military have qualms about, for example, they're asked to take part in one of these boat strikes, they are asked to take part in civilian law enforcement, or they have qualms about any sort of order that they believe to be illegal, what should they do? Well, first I want to center the conversation slightly. I think it's tremendously unfair to people at the low end of the totem pole to have them bear the potentially at least legal burden, but also the burden of moral injury that involves them in what most people would think of as murder. A person who receives an order that he or she believes is unlawful has a number of options. One is to say, "Captain, I think that order is unlawful, and I object to it." And the captain can then say, "Well, thanks very much for your opinion. Now do as I say." You can, unless the order demands immediate compliance, and many orders in an operational setting do require immediate compliance. They don't want a conversation. They just want you to do whatever it is. If it's not one of those situations, you can try to take it up the chain of command to the next senior officer. A very good idea is to try to talk to an attorney. Now, whether any particular person in the military chain has access to a lawyer who can give legal advice in these circumstances is a good question. Commanders presumably can. People who are not literally commanding officers may have difficulty getting the attention of a staff judge advocate or some other attorney. You can call your own lawyer, assuming you have time. But one thing you can do is educate yourself about the general legal framework. Military personnel are we have a high-quality workforce, We have highly educated people in the military, including in the enlisted ranks. I think even though everybody's given some training, one can read up. And I actually think that the kind of national teaching that the country is engaged in right now on this otherwise arcane subject is going to be useful. And I would hope that military personnel are watching this show and reading the papers and being online and watching the discourse. There's been a good deal of wisdom spread around by people who, have good background on these issues. Now, that's not to say that it's always clear what's a lawful order and what isn't a lawful order. Some of them are debatable, and if you disobey a lawful order, if you disobey what turns out to be a lawful order, well, you've made a bad bet. And if you're not sure, you may be rolling the dice, and that's not a good thing. And the military justice system presumes that orders are lawful, which is the only way you could run a railroad. I mean, that's a necessary presumption. But I think the more people have thought about these issues, the better. I think an informed, uniformed workforce is going to be actually more lethal rather than less lethal. I think a sense that what one is doing is the right thing, which includes legality as well as morality and ethics, provides greater confidence in the conduct of military operations, and it provides greater public confidence in the conduct of military operations. We remain a democratic society. We remain a society committed to civilian control of the military. So all of these things point in the same direction. People have to be thoughtful. People have a right to transparency as to the question of legality. People have a right to have the government's positions set forth in hard copy that people in their legal community particularly can examine and evaluate. And at the moment, we don't have that. Thank you so much, Eugene Fidell, for breaking it all down. It's my pleasure. Thanks for getting in touch. And for folks who want more information on this and other stories, visit www.allricenews.com. That's www.allzynews.com. And to watch other videos like these, subscribe right now to Legal AF. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called Wait For It, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting, we got interviews, we got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes where Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe. Music.